Today is June the 12th, 1995, and we're at the home of Alice B. Wyatt at 437 North Fairview. How old are you, Mrs. Wyatt?
I'll be 85 in August.
And where were you born?
I was born in Hillsdale, Michigan.
And your parents' names?
Glenn M. and Faye L. Bates.
And when did you all decide to come to DeLand? How long have you been in DeLand?
Well, my mother and father came to Florida in the winter of 1909, and first they went to Jacksonville, and my mother hated Jacksonville, so they came to DeLand and went to a boarding house on the corner of New York and Alabama, where the Florida Power is now. And it was run by two lovely people, Henry Carson and his wife Mary Jane Carson, who were originally from Halifax, Nova Scotia. But they loved Florida and lived the rest of their lives here. And they called themselves my Florida grandparents. And I really loved them dearly.
Well, where did you go to school?
I went to school and actually there was a frame building, and I tried to remember whether it was on the facing Rich Avenue or whether it was on Delaware, but I know there was a two-story frame building, and I was 6 years old. But my mother had taught me everything that I needed to know in the first grade, so I started in the second grade, and my teacher's name was Mary Beach. There was also one other second grade teacher at that time. Her name was Lottie Eccles, and her second grade was upstairs. One interesting thing happened during that year. The principal, whose name was Maud Barron, a lady principal now in this.
That early, that was early. Unusual, yes it is.
And she came into our room and she said, "I have something serious to talk to you children about." She said, "The janitor has run into a skunk and he is not able to get rid of the odor, and you are not to laugh at him."
Oh.
And one other experience in that first, I remember we had a music teacher named Miss Key, very appropriately, and she asked if anyone knew how to sing the scale. I was ready to try anything, so I said I could, and of course I couldn't, and she made fun of me. So I would not open my mouth to sing again until I was in the 7th grade. So, and that's important for young people who are starting to remember that these experiences can really affect children.
Sometimes little things that an adult says, you don't realize how they can remember it forever.
That's right. And I only remember one classmate, and her name was Ellen Edith Kepler, and she belonged to the Kepler family for whom the road is named.
Kepler Road.
And she really took me under her wing. Since I had never been in school before, I really didn't know how to act in school.
So now you attended elementary school there, then what about junior high?
Well, actually, in 1918, the new brick building, which burned not too many years ago now, every grade was in that one building. And my 3rd grade teacher was Ethel Bushell, and I remember one thing for that year. I was supposed to stay in one afternoon, and I decided I didn't want to, and I ran all the way down to Grandma Carson's, and she sent somebody after me. And I went back, and she put me on her lap, and I remember looking at a glass prism she had in the window while she was talking to me, and told me that I wasn't to do that again. And that year, Mother had taught me the multiplication tables, and so we had contests, and I always won the multiplication pencils. She gave them out. But when it came to spelling, I was always at the end of the spelling bee, and that bothered me all my life. When I became an English teacher, I had to sit with a dictionary to see whether the student was right or I was.
Well, I remember you taught me English on my senior year at the DeLand High School, and very much a beloved teacher. And also, when you came to DeLand, what were the streets like?
Well, our house, which was in the second block of Boris, had pine straw over sand, and we lived on a dead-end street, which was called Cherokee then, but was later renamed Hayden. And so our house was surrounded by the pine straw streets, but shell came from the boulevard down to as far as Alabama.
Oh.
It was shell, and we used to watch the horse-drawn or mule-drawn, I suppose, water wagons sprinkle the shell streets. But of course, the pine streets were not. The pine straw streets were not sprinkled.
So there were not many cars at that time?
No, but my father was always very interested in cars, and in the fall of 1914, he decided he would drive to Florida. And he had I don't know whether it was a 1909, 10, or 11 Buick. And we got as far as Troy, Ohio. By this time, my brother Wilford had been born. And I remember being in the back seat of that car and being pulled out of the ditch by farmers somewhere between Hillsdale, Michigan and Troy, Ohio. And my father then had to put the car on a flat car, in the train and bring it to Florida. But my father was an avid driver. We went, he loved to take us someplace every day. And one of the places we went was, he would take us to the river at night, and we would sit there and listen to the night sounds. And he would also take us out to Lake Winnemusette, and we'd sit out there and listen to the night sounds.
The frogs and the different things?
Yes.
Uh-huh. What was Lake Winnemusette like at that time?
Lake Winnemusette was really, of course, it was not paved at that time, and we didn't go all the way around Winnemusette. We just went to the south end of the lake.
Uh-huh. No homes around it at that time?
No, there weren't any homes around it. And neither were, as far as our home there in Boris Avenue, Hayden, or at that time Cherokee, dead-ended there. And beyond that, there wasn't any, there was no development to speak of at all. And that was just a wonderful place to play. That whole territory where we lived, we just had trees, just beautiful oak trees, and we played hide and go seek and fruit basket turnover. And also there was the golf course was there below us on Boris, beginning with where the Cloisters is now,
yes.
and where the housing project is. And that was a wonderful place to walk and take evening strolls. And there were gazebos there, and also a pond. And my brother, I wanted to tell you about my brother and the ponds. This particular pond, the golfers would lose their golf balls in there, and he would wade in and get the balls out. But Moccasin Pond, which was actually the name of the pond that is in Earl Brown Park.
Oh,
and my brother,
Moccasin Pond, huh? Mm-hmm.
And my brother learned to swim there. He caught snakes there and came home and skinned them. And my father had built him a little clubhouse, and he had skins on the wall. And he also caught an alligator about 2 or 3 feet long. He brought it home, but it only lived 2 or 3 days after he brought it home. I think he had hurt it with a slingshot.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds interesting, I'll tell you.
One thing he did find, though, he said not too long ago somebody drowned in the pond at Earl Brown Park.
Moccasin Pond.
And the paper said that was the first drowning. But he said it definitely was not the first drowning. One time when he went to Moccasin Pond, he found a body in there. And he said that Harris boy, that's all I know. He said that Harris boy was drowned and was in the pond. And someone else came along and found it too. So it was different.
And that was the early 1900s. Huh?
We can take a break.
Okay.
Betty, speak up, please.
Okay. What were the buildings like in DeLand?
Well, of course, I used to choose which way I would go to school. when I was in the first year I went to school, our neighbors had a little store across the street from us, and he had a horse-drawn wagon, and he'd take us to school. But after that, for the other 10 years that I went to DeLand school, I walked, and I would choose the way I was coming home, and just to make it different. But one on New York Avenue, for instance, the Landises had a beautiful home where the post office is now. It was just very beautiful. And on the corner was the Chamber of Commerce on the corner of Florida and New York Avenue on the southwest corner. And to my delight, there was a library there. We had no libraries in the school in those days, not a single book.
No media center.
Even when I went in high school, there was a locked bookcase that had books in it. That was it. But I loved that library at the Chamber of Commerce, and also later on, of course, the library was where this, which has now been refurbished, that beautiful home on the corner of Garfield and New York Avenue.
Yes. Well, what were the stores like downtown? Do you remember what they were like?
I remember especially three of them, because when I was very young, my Grandma Carson, as I called her, and my mother would send me to the store. And right around the corner from New York Avenue on the boulevard was a grocery store run by a man named I.T. Blaine. And he had many different kinds of groceries, but of course the cat in the window fascinated me.
You're still a cat collector, too.
And then next to there was, this was before McCrory's, long before McCrory's came in there, J.T. Allen had a furniture store, and I remember going with my father, and there was a freight elevator in the back of it, and riding up to the storage room. But the most interesting store was the Marsh's Meat Market, which was the next one, and the meat market had sawdust on the floor. But Grandma Carson would send me there, and it was a very large, amiable black man, and he told my grandmother, he said, I always love to see Alice come in, because she comes in and she says, I want a piece of meat this big. and he said, my little hand, he'd roll his eyes, I'm sure.
Do you remember any other points of interest? What about theaters? Theaters there.
When I was 5 years old, someone came and asked Mother if she would let me be Tom Thumb's bride, and there was an opera house over where Hunter's restaurant is now, and so I was the little bride in Tom Thumb's wedding, and the only thing, there are two things I remember about that. The groom, they gave us ice cream at the end of and the groom turned his back and ate his ice cream. And Ruth Ford, who was a little bit older than I was, had a part, and she was I believe, the stepmother in there.
Well, it sounds fun. Talking about ice cream, do you remember any ice cream stores or any special?
No, I actually don't. But let me go back for a minute to the
Sure,
theaters,
sure.
because is Gibbs still, the women's store still on the right-hand side?
I think it's the men's store now.
The men's store is, well, anyway, between I believe it's the block between Indiana and Rich. There was a Princess Theater where later was the telephone company, and also I think where the Rainbow Girls were later. And I used to go to that Princess Theater and pay 5 cents to see Mary Pickford or Fatty Arbuckle.
Yeah.
And then of course later was the Drika Theater, and then finally in the middle 20s, I remember seeing A.B.'s Irish Rose at the Athens Theater.
What about restaurants?
Actually, we weren't eater-outers, but there
People
wasn't.
didn't eat out much
We
years
didn't eat,
ago.
no, we didn't.
No, they didn't.
I remember, though, one of our neighbors was the waitress, and there was a restaurant downtown, and I don't know where, because she let me go one day, and she let me wait on the tables, and someone gave me a penny for a tip.
Oh, my goodness. What about railroads? I can remember railroad tracks being downtown. Do you remember anything
Oh,
about
yes. The railroad tracks came down, and even the block from New York Avenue to Howery and Boris, they still, while the railroad tracks weren't there, yes, they were there early because when the circus came to town, and my brother ran away, and he was a very small boy at the time, and my father found him, and my father wasn't a strict disciplinarian, but he lectured him all the way back, and he said, do you want to go with those Zulus? And they had pictures of the African, maybe I shouldn't have said that.
Oh, no, that's fine. What about the band shell? Do you remember the band shell?
Oh, yes, the band shell and the concerts on, we frequently went to the band concerts. I think they were on Saturday night, but, and going downtown was really, people just took their cars and parked and went downtown.
And visited? And
visited, especially on Saturday night.
That was getting with friends at that time.
Yes.
What about the post office? Where was the post office back then?
Well, the post office was on the corner of Indiana and in Florida. But before that, I really think I remember that where Allen's drugstore was, I believe maybe that was the very first post office. But I do, of course, remember the other post office more. And one of the ladies that worked there was our doctor's wife. Our doctor was Dr. Stevens, and his wife worked in the post office. Also, you know, the city hall was in that same section, and my brother remembers seeing the mules that stopping and talking to a Mr. Tanner, who was in charge of the mules, because the fire trucks and the water wagons were pulled by mules. And incidentally, I do remember a livery stable on New York Avenue, right about where the parking lot is now, not on the north side.
Do you remember any other stores of interest that?
Well, the Haynes brothers, I suppose they were brothers. Anyway, the Haynes grocery was down near on the west side of the boulevard, down near Rich. I don't remember too much about those.
What about furniture stores?
Well, Mr. Allen's furniture store was the main furniture store, and then Watts Hardware, I believe, was across the corner where now it's called the Fish Building. It wasn't the Fish Building then. And of course, in the drugstores, we used to have to buy all of our books. The state did not furnish books when I was going to school. And the drugstore on the corner, we would have our books there.
Well, you mentioned something about the DeLand house, taking music lessons there.
Yes.
Would you like to tell something about that?
Well, my first music lessons, were in the Baptist church, which was on, at that time, was a nice brick building that was on the boulevard. What building is there now? Well, there's stores
across
there
from the
now.
Barnett Bank? It was across from the Barnett Bank?
No, it's where I think it's Gould's Insurance Company, and then just north of that was the Baptist church.
Yes.
And I had music lessons there, and Mrs. Smith, I had music lessons with her.
Eva Baker Smith?
Eva Baker Smith.
Yes.
But what she, I shouldn't tell this tale on her, but what she did was she wouldn't listen while she would go off and do her housework, and I never did learn to use my left hand properly because she didn't pay
right
enough
with
attention
you.
until I went to the DeLand house when I was somewhat older, and I believe it was Miss Davidson, taught me music there, actually in the entry part.
Did she live there at that time?
She lived
there, and now it's the DeLand house.
Yes.
Uh-huh. And who else lived at the DeLand house that you recall?
Oh, the Hubers, who originally came to DeLand about 1914, I think I've heard them say, because we went to the same church. And they had a hotel called the Albion, which is on the location where the site of the present-day courthouse in there. There were 3 hotels in there. There was a commercial hotel on one side of the street, and I don't know the name of the one on the other side of the street, and the Albion. And Albion was on the north side. And now in about 1926, of course, I remember the old frame courthouse, but then the current courthouse was built in about 1926 and 1927, and my father always said he had a part in that because he painted all the doors in the courthouse.
Well, what about the frame courthouse? Where was it located? Same place?
In the same area.
Well, that's interesting. What about electricity back years ago?
Well, one of the places my father used to like to drive was out Spring Garden Avenue, and there was an electric plant out there, and the ice plant was out there. The streets had lights, but on the corner of our corner, there was just like a single bulb there with a metal shade to it.
Well, tell us what the truck route was like. It's the truck route now, 15A, but what was it like years ago? It didn't look like a wide place to drive like it is now. What was it like?
No, of course, and it was not paved. It was just a beautiful tree-lined street with homes, and it was just a nice place to drive. Of course, do you know that I was 12 years old before I ever went to Pearson, because there was only a woods road, a trail from here to Pearson. But we did go to Daytona, and we went to Eustis, and that was quite a trip because we had to take the ferry across the St. Johns River.
Oh.
And we went out to Crow's Bluff and rang a cowbell, and if they were on the other side, they came over and picked you up. And of course, it was really an adventure to go to Eustis because we usually had some flat tires on the way, and the car had its toolbox on the side, and you had to be sure that you had everything you needed to repair the inner tube.
It wasn't a repair station right close, or no.
And the tires, of course, were small in those days. We also went to Orange City frequently, and I also loved to see the houses along the way because almost so many of them had names, and the people Bidawee and names that we would look for. We went to Blue Springs. And one vivid memory from Blue Springs is when I got home, I had fleas all over me.
Oh my! Not red bugs, but fleas.
Because there were pigs that were running free there. We went to Sanford one time across Lake Monroe, and a friend of Dad's had a boat, and that said I really had never been to Sanford only once or twice before the roads came through. Not long ago, I saw this documentary about the history of automobiles, and it reminded me of really the changes that came in the 1920s. Of course, our house, it was paved. Boris was paved in the middle of the 1920s, and it was also paved down the dead-end street. And long before that, the roads were, Pearson was accessible, and Seville was, I taught in Seville 8 years, and I liked Seville. I just couldn't get a job here in DeLand for quite a while, and when I came to DeLand in 1944, I had a full schedule. I had classes every period. I had a girls' club. I had to direct the plays. I had the Growler, the school paper, and I had the Athenian, and all of that for the regular pay.
Well, I remember in 1949 the Athenian was dedicated to you because you were such an outstanding teacher. And I remember that. Also, where did you go to college?
I went to, I got my bachelor's degree from Florida State College for Women, and then I got my master's degree from the University of Florida later.
Well, let's see, thinking about, what about the nearest neighbors? Did you have lots of neighbors, or was it
Yes.
houses long ways apart, or what?
No, Boris Avenue at that time was a very friendly neighborhood. It is not now, but because it has really is a deteriorated neighborhood. My daughter still lives in our home on the corner of Boris and Hayden, but it is not a place where I really would feel comfortable to live.
Well, what year did you get married?
I was married in 1935, and my daughter Jean was born in 1936 at the hospital on Stone Street.
Uh-huh.
And her husband, incidentally, was born there 6 years before. He was born in 1930.
What is her husband's name?
Hubert Henderson.
Right.
And they had a daughter in 1954.
Mm-hmm.
And she was born at Fish Hospital,
Uh-huh.
where I later volunteered for 18 years as a pink lady.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. Well, do you remember any old-fashioned Christmases? What was old-fashioned Christmas like a long time ago? How was it different?
Well, you know, I can remember my mother telling about her Christmases, but we just had a Christmas at home. But at school, the years that I was in Seville, we actually had a school tree, and we did exchange gifts at school.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, it was we just had our home Christmases.
Do you remember the Depression days?
Definitely.
Could
I
you tell us
started
about that?
I started teaching in 1931 in Jasper, Florida. I was there for 2 years. I received one paycheck the whole time I was there. The first year I was there, I was supposed to be getting $80 a month. And the first year I was there, I received only script, but the banks took and discounted, giving me $72 a month for 8 months. The second year when I went back, I was supposed to be getting $85 a month, but they said no, they still had to be at the $80 a month. I did get one paycheck that year. The last 3 months I received nothing. And 3 or 4 years after that, I gave the case to a lawyer to see if I could get anything back. And he got $100, of which he charged $67 for his fee. So I taught for 3 months for $33.
Oh, my.
But my Easter outfit, that first year I was there, the whole outfit cost $9, and we only paid $20 a month board.
Uh-huh. Well, how was the dressing like? How did people dress differently years ago than they do now? What was the... Can you describe some of the outfits that the girls wore, or they...
Well, I do know that I have a picture of myself in the 8th grade, and I had high-top shoes on, but I was embarrassed by that because I was the only one that was still wearing the high-top shoes. It was just out of the way. And of course, I think it was more or less the same as it is now. The fads would come and go.
Right. Here's a picture that I'd like for you to hold up. That a long time ago. That was you were in your 30s, I think you said.
Yeah, I was about 37 or 8.
That was probably during the time you were teaching. And
yeah, I had gone to summer school. It was in 1947 because I had gone to let me put this away, gone to summer school at Gainesville, and someone came along and offered to take that picture. And
what event in DeLand made a big impression on you? Can you
I'm sorry, repeat.
What event in DeLand made a big impression on you?
Well, I know the event that hurt me more than anything else was the burning of the school.
Yes.
Where I had gone for 11 years, attended school there, and I had taught there from 1944 to 1961 until the new school was built on Hill.
Right.
I really think that. But of course, back in 1917, I do remember the the war effort. There were a lot of gatherings for people to try to, and we did buy stamps and to buy the Liberty Bonds. And I know one time there was one of the rallies, they asked people to volunteer to buy them, and I volunteered. I had no money or anything else, but and then I worried about that. But I did do my stamps at school.
What was the war days like in DeLand? Do you remember anything?
Well, of course, I do remember at 11 o'clock, this is in 1917, or possibly in 1918, at 11 o'clock we had to stop for a minute. There was a big whistle downtown, right about where the courthouse is now. There was a big, at the waterworks, there was a big whistle, and they would blow that, and everyone would stop. And my father had chickens over on Hayden, and I remember usually that's where I was about the time I was going over to feed his chickens and stop. And also, I don't think we said anything about the churches.
No. Would you like to tell us about
Yes.
the church?
Well, where Google's insurance company is now, on the corner of the Boulevard and is that Wisconsin?
Wisconsin,
And,
right.
Grandma Carson and her husband went there, and until I was 10 years old, I went there with her. And I remember we used to go to our Sunday school classes with marching by onward Christian soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
But in 1920 or 21, my mother attended it and was a member of the First United Methodist Church. And my grandmother, Grandma Carson, had sold the house, I think, to the Florida Power. And she was getting much older. And so I decided I'd go to church with Mother, and I joined that church in the spring of either 1921 or 22. I can't remember which. I've been a member, and I attend there now. And then my daughter attended when she was younger.
Do you think the majority of people attended churches back then, or do you think, how do you feel about that?
Well, I know my neighbors did, and my mother did, but my father wasn't a church attender, but my mother was, and she was very active in the church. I might tell you something about about the libraries here. I think I did mention that we didn't have any in school, that the Chamber of Commerce had one wing, and then the library that's now being refurbished on the corner of New York and Garfield. But I became very active in the Friends of the Library, and we worked to build the library on Rich Avenue. And then I was also very active in the 1980s when we were getting money. I think that's the only time I ever did any telemarketing. Each of us had a certain number of pages in the phone book that we had to call up and see if we could get support for having the library come here. And I enjoyed my work with the Friends of the Library, and also my volunteer work at Fish.
Can you think of any funny or interesting stories about your working days when you were working, or is anything up in mind about that?
Well, I hadn't thought along those lines.
Just thought maybe you...
I was telling a friend of mine the other day, though, I said, this is when I was teaching in Seville, and the schools there did not have any screens on the windows. I hope they do now, and because those flies that bite so would come in, and that was really horrid. But I wasn't married then, and one of the children, Kate's, Miss Bates, come here to the window. And I went to the window and said, look out there. And there was a little 2-year-old boy smoking a cigar out there.
Oh my goodness! Well, that is a funny little story, but I hope he learned better for 20 years. Oh goodness!
I know. When we integrated at DeLand High School, the first year was a little difficult, but I had one I thought really outstanding victory. I guess you'd call it a victory that way, or success. I had children working with me, students working with me in the library, and this one girl, we just couldn't get along. We just couldn't get along. So I went to the counselor and I said, well, I believe that for our mutual benefit, we're going to have to separate. He said, well, just go ahead and try it. And so we did. At the end of the year, that girl wrote me a note and said, I love you. And, you know, so we did get together and we did, you know, solve our problem.
Right. Do you remember the principals that you worked under at DeLand High School?
Yes, and I also remember many of the others that I didn't work under. And when I was in elementary school, B.F. Ezell was the principal. And one interesting thing about him, he used corporal punishment. But the way he used it was, he would call the boys in and say, I think this deserves 3 licks or 5 licks. And he would have the boy give it to him.
Oh, I see. That is.
And so that was an interesting thing. Also, as far as punishment in school is concerned, I've always been small, and when I went to Seville, there were some pretty big, tough boys that were there, and this is in 1933, and they were using corporal punishment. And so I don't remember what caused me to send the boys to the office, but I did. And the principal told me that I would have to administer the whipping with the rubber hose. And so, of course, I did, since he said to, and that was my one and only time. And it came back and hit me on the arm, so that I went home and practiced on the palm tree, but I never used it again.
How do you think children long ago and today differ in being able to teach them and their discipline and all? How do you...
I had no connections with the schools nowadays, but from what I hear, it's a lot harder to do. I did teach in Guatemala one summer, and I noticed the same thing happening there that happened to me later in DeLand High School. The boys and the girls were separated in Guatemala in the schools. This was a private school, and my boy was misbehaving, and he was standing up, and I touched him and told him to sit down. He says, don't touch me. And I had the later something, a similar incident in DeLand High School, and the boy told me the same thing. So, and I did have a little trouble after integration, but I had always said, now boys, behave yourself. And I could never say boys again. And, you know, and there were just, you know, a few little things like that.
Well, when you think of DeLand, what is a big improvement from long ago and today? What do you think of?
Well, I think DeLand is a beautiful city. I think it has become more beautiful. I'm sorry that it's, the traffic is, but that's everywhere. The traffic is not good, but I love DeLand.
It is. It's a beautiful place to live.
I wouldn't want to live anywhere else.
Can you think of anything else you'd like to tell us before we close this interview? Or
well,
just glance on your notes if you think
yeah,
of
I do
something.
have some notes, but I think I've really just about covered everything. Oh, I didn't finish telling you about the principals, though. George Marks was my principal when I was in the 8th grade, and I really loved him, and I felt, oh, I hate to have him go into the county administration. And later I worked with him in the county administration. And then when I was in high school, we had a principal, Mr. Adams, and then M.J. Parrott. And M.J. Parrott was really a delightful person.
Yes, he was.
And of course, he was also principal then when I was teaching, when I first started teaching in DeLand. And let's see, I've forgotten who was the principal after him. Anyway.
Well, it's really been more than a pleasure talking with you today, Miss Wyatt, and just being with you. And you're still that tiny little person that I remember when you taught me, 90-something pounds. But it's been wonderful, and thank you. I'm Betty Van Allen, and thanks so very much for taking your time.
Well, I enjoyed doing it.
Thank you.